thanks for having me. Obviously, this is awesome to be up here. I did have to call out. Everyone here has been so nice. Iowa's reputation is held well within this room, so thank you for all being so nice. I had to comment when Maria was having everyone do meditation earlier. I walked in from the side, and so I cheated. I had my eyes open, and I was looking a little. And she was telling people to make different facial expressions and things, and she said, perhaps even scowl, and you all suck at scowling. Like, there was not one authentic scowl in here that I was like, that person's upset. It was the most pleasant set of scowls I'd ever seen. So I hope that we can keep that positive energy up this whole time. So when I say power of the past, I mean like way back in the past. So this story came to me from a colleague who was writing a book called Primed to Perform with his wife. So Neil Doshi is the author. Lindsay McGregor is his better half, who also wrote the book with him. And so that book is about human performance. It really is what motivates people at work. And I read this story, I talked to him about this story, and it really resonated with me. So the story goes back to the 1800s in the city of Delhi. Now at that time, Delhi was under British colonial rule. Also at that time, they had what we would consider to be a bit of a cobra problem, meaning that they had an unusually high rate of deaths resulting from cobra bites. And so British government said clearly, we depend on this for trade. We can't have people being scared to come in and out of there, otherwise we're not going to be able to get some of that money out of the transaction, so we have to solve this problem. So they did what a lot of companies will do in a similar situation. When there's a problem we've identified, we want to fix it. They did an incentives program. So they essentially turned all of the community into cobra exterminators and said, we will pay you X amount of money for every dead cobra that you bring in. And after a bit of a rocky start, programs started to work. People were bringing in dead cobras all the time. Death rate started to drop. But there came a point where suddenly it started to kind of pick back up. This death rate started to spike. And the government was like, why? This doesn't make any sense. We're bringing in more snakes than ever before. We're paying people out more than we ever have. However, this problem keeps persisting. What's going wrong? So they did a little digging. And what they found was that some rather entrepreneurial individuals had figured out there's pretty good money to be made in the dead cobra business. So then some of you who are laughing have beat me there. They started cobra farming. So they would raise these cobras, kill them when they got to a certain size, bring them in for the bounty, and get the money. And so clearly not achieving the goal that the British government had in mind. So they did what most companies would also do, which is shamed them. This person ruined it for all of you. Program's finished. Boo these people, right? And so the problem with that is that someone who has the moral compass to cobra farm in their own community just to nickel and dime the government probably has the same moral compass to do exactly what they ended up doing, which is they said, oh, you're not going to pay me for these deadly venomous snakes? Okay, cool. Well, they are your problem now, and they just let them all go out into the community. So at the end of this program, the city of Delhi had a worse cobra problem than they did at the beginning. Now, why is this relevant to this group specifically? There is a common phrase in management, but I would say across even the self-employed out here, which is what gets measured gets done. And it is absolutely true. The results, the metrics that we chase after, highly shape the actions that we take on a day-to-day basis. How many people in this room have, by show of hands, a set of metrics or a set of goals that you have either on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis? A lot of us. So, my point is not to say results are bad. They are very good. Metrics are very good. They allow us to see how we perform over time, how we perform in relationship to each other, as well as how we perform against competition. All inherently good things. The problem is when we live in a world of results and that drives everything that we do. How many people have, and not necessarily now at this point in your life, but at some point in your life, had a job where you woke up, you went to work, you were given a set of results, and you were asked to take a certain set of actions to get those results. And then, based on if you did or didn't exceed your goal or hit your goal, one of two things happens. Say you get the result you're looking for. Great. Boss says, awesome, you hit it. Let's raise it by 20%. Now you got to go do this other thing. So I go back to my actions. What am I going to do now? Problem solve, see if I get the result. Option A. Option B, I don't hit the number. Ooh, I was short. My goal was 130,000 this month. I only got to 120. Ooh, uncomfortable conversation ensues. Do we need to put you on a performance plan? What's going on here? How are you going to fix this? In other words, what actions are you going to take now to fix that, get the correct result, and get back on track? So I go back to my actions. And pretty soon, you wake up, you go to work, get your metrics or goals, know what they are, take a bunch of actions to get those, wait and see what happens, and rinse and repeat, rinse, repeat. And then Monday bleeds into Tuesday, bleeds into Thursday, and you've lost 2 weeks, and every day was basically the same. How many people have ever had a job like that? I worked in a department store for 7 years. This was my life. Life took place outside of the walls at work. This is what I showed up to do. I was there to get a paycheck, and then I had to try and make life work outside of that. And the problem is, when we have workplaces like this, habits like this, environments like this, knowing the impact that work has on our day-to-day lives, it's such a huge piece of everything that we do. Because if you're in this room, you probably take work home with you. It influences the way you show up for your kids, your spouse, your significant other, whoever it is, the people, your family and friends. What happens during work bleeds into that, and it impacts the way that we show up. Because it's such a huge piece of our day-to-day lives. Now, Gallup in 2013 did a survey. They do these every few years. They have more recent numbers for the US, but this is the global numbers. I think this is the most recent global survey they did on the state of the workplace, specifically relating to happiness and engagement. In their survey, they estimated that there are 3 billion employed people on the planet in 2013. Out of that 3 billion, a certain percentage fell into the categories of either disengaged, unmotivated, or just generally unhappy with the work that they do. I want to hear some numbers. Now, mind you, global, not just the notoriously overworked, overstressed United States. All of our friends and neighbors, what do you think that percentage was of people who fell into those categories? 80%. 80? 60? 70? We found our pessimist. We have a 90. All right. What else? 99. Upped the ante. Well done. $1. So the funny thing is that 90 is actually the closest. 87%. Now, in a slide deck presentation, that's a big number. And I can do that dramatic pause for effect. But I want you to actually think in terms of real life here. That means that nearly 9 out of every 10 working people on this planet, your friends, your family members, the people you care most about, 9 out of 10 of them, give or take, if they don't hate what they do, they at least don't care about it. And let's say that's 2013, that's way in the past. We're trending towards more positive workplaces, more meaningful work. Purpose has become a consistent buzzword, so that's got to be doing something, right? So now we've improved by 30%. A global increase for 3 billion people of 30% in happiness and engagement, that's a pretty big win. We can all agree. That still means that if that statistic held true, I could look at this room, and more than 1 out of every 2 of you that I make eye contact with right now, when you get that call, when you go into the office, your day gets worse rather than better. And that's not okay. Especially when you think about the impact I talked about earlier. How you show up for friends, how you show up for family. You can't really put this stuff in a bubble. It bleeds into the rest of your life whether or not you want it to. And we could debate for days and have long discussions. Tonight, over the happy hour, you may even have that discussion of what led us, like what made this 87%? What led us to this point? And it's an important conversation to have. But to me, the more important question is, what's this other 13% doing? How is their experience so drastically different from yours and mine? Statistically speaking, of course, yours and mine. Not necessarily true. But I have a hard time believing that all of them are Instagram photographers flying to amazing destinations taking pictures of food. That may account for 2%, but not the full 13. These people are working side by side with us in our offices. They are the same people you have conversations with on a day-to-day basis. So what's different about their day-to-day experience than your own? What makes it so that they feel that sense of engagement, joy, and really fulfillment from the work that they do? And there's a part of that equation I talked about earlier, this hamster wheel, that impacts both the results that we deem as worthy of chasing, as well as the actions that are acceptable in pursuit of those results. And it starts with a P. What do you think that word is? Planning, what did I hear? Purpose? Perspective, perception? Progress. I'll grant you, there are a lot of P words that could fit here. Perception is the one I go with. How I perceive the world impacts the way that I interact with it. It directly dictates what I see in front of me. We often see the world we perceive, not the other way around. We don't perceive the world as it is. And so, depending on my perception of a situation, if an obstacle comes my way, I can see opportunity, or I can see a roadblock. I can be motivated, or I can be disappointed and try and move on. I can have a relationship that I think is worth investing time, energy, I can see potential in it, or I can see someone who is a potential enemy, something that's not worth my time, and I move on. The way in which you see the world dictates the way you engage with it. I am not silly enough, I'm silly in many ways, but I'm not silly enough to think that I can come in here and tell you how to do your jobs. The collective knowledge that's in this room right now is wildly impressive. There are people who have been doing this for decades in this room. You know your business way more than I ever could. So I'm not going to try and tell you the results you should be chasing. Don't know. It's not that I don't care. I love you all. You're individual snowflakes and you're beautiful. However, I just don't have the expertise to tell you that. I also wouldn't dream of telling you how to do what you do. I couldn't tell you the actions to take to get those results. You all know that. You can make those choices on your own. This next 30-ish, 45-ish minutes, what I want to talk about is this piece here, the perception. What I hope for you all is that by the end of this, even if we're not at a place of complete on it, you'll be finished enough that we can take all the information, all of the data, the facts, the experience that's in this room right now, and just shift the light on it a little bit so that you can see the things in just a little bit of a different way, enough to where you'll take actions you never thought you'd take and get results that you never dreamed you'd get. Now that's a hefty undertaking for 30 minutes. So, how do we get there? Earlier, Penny mentioned I work with Simon Sinek. How many people have either read Start With Why, seen the TED Talk, or are familiar with Simon's work? Don't worry, this wasn't pre-work that was assigned. I'm just trying to get a beat. So, no worries. Okay, so to really get into the weeds on this, we have to create kind of a common language or a common base understanding to get where we're going. The framework that we use to illustrate this is something that Simon came up with, which is called the Golden Circle. Now, the Golden Circle is simply a representation of how we operate as human beings and how businesses operate in general. I will explain the layers. It's a very simple bullseye, 3 layers, why, how, and what. A little bit of context. At the time that Simon discovered this and articulated it, he was in advertising, he was in PR, marketing, and he was really just trying to figure out why some advertising was effective, whereas people who may have had a better product, have had higher customer spending habits, better demographics they were working with, weren't able to generate as good of results as these other companies. Why was it that certain companies could get really loyal fan bases, customer bases, as well as employees, whereas these other companies that had objectively better products, on paper the specs were better, the benefits packages were better, the places where their headquarters were better, but they still couldn't get that level of loyalty from inside or outside the company. And in doing his research, he found that those companies also matched up the way that social movements work. Inspiring leaders were able to get loyalty, whereas some people who were really great, really enigmatic, just couldn't get that spark to catch. What was the difference there? And what he found, and he explained through the golden circle, was that all of the inspiring companies as well as leaders think, act, and communicate the same way. It just happens to be the opposite of how everyone else around them does. So, what do these mean? Everybody in this room, everyone that's ever lived, every company that's ever existed knows what it is that you do. As a company, these are the products or services that you sell. As an individual, these are the different hats that you wear. I am a realtor, I am a manager, I am a coach, I am a friend, all of the different labels that we have on a day-to-day basis. What it is that you do. It's very easy to articulate. This is kind of the zone we live in as comfortable human beings. So, when you walk into a party, what is the first thing you say to someone that you just met? What do? Right? It's easy, quick, tangible. We think we can infer something about them when we hear what they do. But we're just looking for those facts and figures, and they're very common. So everybody knows what it is they do. Less people and less companies know how it is they do what they do. Now, by that, I want to make a distinction. I don't mean the process by which you bring your what's to life. Pretty sure I could go to anybody in this room and you could say, you could walk me through, these are the steps that I take to get a lead, follow up with them, bring them to contract, all these different things. You could walk me through that very easily. So that's not what we're talking about when we say how. What we mean when we talk about how is how are you different than other people who do about the same thing that you do. So these are the things that set you apart. The way that you show up in different situations. We've got a lot of what's in this room of realtors. What is it that makes you specifically different than the person you're sitting next to? How do you show up differently than they do in your day-to-day interactions, in your business interactions, in your marketing? A lot of us think about it in branding terms, but we don't think about it in terms of authenticity. Sometimes we think about what do people want to hear? What would make someone trust me? Rather than saying this is who I actually am. So think about those things. So when we talk about how less people think about it because their concept of it isn't really grounded in reality, it's grounded in a PR exercise. So less people and companies really think about it. Even fewer individuals and companies know why it is they do what they do. When we work with a lot of different companies, and the number one answer we get back is either money or to please the shareholders. Those are like the two most common responses we get. Money is absolutely important. Shareholders, that's a different conversation. But money is absolutely important. It's the fuel that powers the car. But to say that we're in business to make money is essentially to say, I put gas in my car so that I can drive and put gas in my car. That makes absolutely no sense. Where are you going? What's the point? Why do you exist in the first place? Do we really need another realtor here? Yes. Okay, tell me why. So when we talk about why, what we mean is your purpose, your cause, your belief. What's the world you're actually creating rather than just existing in and occupying space? And because this is kind of fuzzy, because it's a little bit fluffy of a term, it's not as tangible and measurable, and we don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, we don't put a lot of energy towards it. We kind of avoid the topic altogether. And so, on a day-to-day basis, most of our interactions start with the thing we're most comfortable with, and they move towards the thing that's fuzziest, and we usually stop at how. So, for example, if you're in the car listening to a radio commercial, and a commercial comes on for a product, they usually tell you, here's the product we're selling, here's our company name, whatever. Here's how our team is different, or how our product development process is different, or we're so customer focused, or we're driven by innovation, or all these other different ways that they show up in that process. And then they expect you to buy something from them. Same thing for elections. I will tell you my name, what office I'm running for. I will tell you how I think I'm different from the people I'm running against, and I expect you to vote for me. The problem is, it's not super inspirational. So, walking through an example that might be a little applicable to you all. So, a typical commercial might sound something like this. We are a world-class realty group. How do we do that? Well, we take an unconventional perspective, we call it like we see it, and we're committed to making long-term investment. We have the most experienced realtors, the best pricing, lowest commission rates. Come work with us. Boiled, it's a little simple, but pretty close to what we typically do on a day-to-day basis. It's how we talk about ourselves a lot. Now, who knows who I was talking about with that? It was just kind of this general statement about this industry, and perhaps some of the cool stuff that came at the end is a little bit distinctive and unique. But that doesn't tell me much about your business. And what Simon found was that while this communication is the norm and everybody does it, it's not inspiring. And the companies and the individuals who can inspire loyalty, not just repeat business, but loyalty, think, act, and communicate the opposite way. They get clear on why they're here in the first place, articulate that, and then work outward towards what they do. So take that same example. Let's say they got clear on why they existed, why this work is meaningful, why ultimately they got into the game in the first place. So they may say something like, everything we do is designed to help people feel like a part of a community so that they always feel safe and supported. How do we do that? Well, we take an unconventional perspective, we call it like we see it, and we're committed to making long-term investment. We just happen to be a world-class realty group. Our representatives are the friendliest, they have the most experience, they're in your area, we have the lowest commission rates. Come work with us. It feels different when you put it that way. It's not just the fact that I added another section. I would have been sitting there saying, duh, you added a paragraph at the beginning, so of course it's going to seem different. But let's walk through that. If you had ended that first commercial with everything we do is designed to help people feel like a part of a community so that they always feel safe and supported, how does that feel coming at the end? It's less important, right? This is probably the least important information that I needed to get across to you. Might also feel like a little bit of emotional and manipulation as well. We're just saying this inspiring thing at the end so that we can sway you into it if you're not already convinced. When you start with why, when you lead with that, you create a context for the entire conversation. Not just for the customer, but for yourself. And it makes you really reevaluate and prioritize what I need to talk about, how I need to show up in this engagement, and what ultimately I want to do as a result. And I said it feels different. And I use that word very intentionally because it's actually kind of how we're wired. Like, this is great management theory. This is great marketing theory. But this is how we as human beings are actually wired. So if you had the golden circle and you put it next to a conveniently, perfectly circular cross-section of the human brain, it might look a little something like this. So, and this is very simple biology, I grant you. But at a high level, this is what it would look like. On the outside of the brain, we have the neocortex. Then on the inside of the brain, which would correspond roughly to like the how and the why, you have the limbic brain. So now you have some terms you can pull out at trivia night. What does that actually mean? What do these do? So your neocortex, this is the part of the brain people think of as like your modern brain. This is the evolved human brain. This is responsible for all of your rational and analytical thought as well as language. So actually kind of nice that it lines up perfectly with what, because it speaks what very fluently. It's very rational, knows the language very well, and can articulate it. Your limbic brain, however, is responsible for your feelings like trust and loyalty, and it's where all human decision-making takes place. However, it has no capacity for language. Now, is anyone in this room surprised that the part of your brain that is responsible for human behavior is also where emotion lives? I am not surprised at that whatsoever. I think each person here is probably thinking about all of the irrational things that happen around them on a day-to-day basis with human behavior. A lot of things in your own life, you have probably done this. In fact, I'm not going to say probably, each one of us has, whether or not you are nodding your head. You have probably gotten the facts and figures, been thinking about maybe the purchase between two different items, and someone's trying to sell you real hard on this one. It makes more sense, it's cheaper, it's going to last longer, it's got this warranty, but it just doesn't feel right. I really think I should get this other one because so-and-so told me about it and they just loved it. Yeah, but on paper, you know, your neocortex is like red flags here and there. It's like, come on, like really, dude? This is obviously the right choice to make. And your limbic brain's just like, nice try, not gonna happen. We're gonna go with option A. And this is how we operate on a regular basis. And this is why it's so important when I talk about starting with why. When you have a strong sense of why you do what you do, it evokes an emotion. You feel that. You feel fulfillment. You feel like you're making an impact. I notice on some of these tables it says making a difference, it's what we do. When you know the difference you make and you can see it, you feel it. It creates that emotional reaction and response in you. And when that thing is important to someone else and you talk about it, it creates that same emotional response in them. And you have that context and that connection immediately. This is why Simon has a famous quote that is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Catchy, bumper sticker worthy, however, also biologically accurate. The catch is, it has to be authentic. And I say authentic, that's a really buzzword-ish thing right now. So I'll tell you how I define authenticity, which is simply you are who you pretend to be. Point blank. The person you portray yourself as is who you actually are at your core. The things that you say, the things that you do, reflect what it is you say you believe in the person that you say you are. And that is the foundation of a trusting relationship. That's the foundation of a loyal relationship. We all have repeat friends who are not what you would consider a loyal friend. That person who will show up for the barbecues, or we have an open bar, or we're in your neighborhood, you want to hang out? Yes, 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 I will always show up for that. That is a repeat friend. But you would not call that person when your car breaks down at 3 a.m. and it's snowing, because you know that they're not answering that call. That person who's going to pick up, that loyal friend, is not going to just say, hey, sorry, I can't make it. You know you'll call that loyal friend because they're going to say, hey, do you need me to come pick you up? I'll be there in 10. And we kind of convince ourselves that that's not possible in a business context. But it's absolutely possible in a business context. We see it all the time. Loyal customers are the same as loyal friends. They are willing to put up with a little bit of a delay in shipping, or, you know, you're not really in my area, but I'm willing to work with you long distance, or it's a little bit of a higher commission rate, but I just love you as a person. That loyalty comes through because it's not business to business. It's not this entity to a human. It is a human to another human. And so we have to create those connections on a day-to-day basis. That's, if you approach it as people to people and not business to people, it changes the equation. So you have to create a sense of authenticity in your day-to-day operations, whether in business or in person-to-person interactions in your personal life. So what does that look like? In the context of the golden circle, you have 3 things you just got to keep in mind. The first thing is you got to have clarity of why. You got to know what I stand for, what I believe, and actually be able to articulate it. And that last part's probably the hardest part of that. And be willing to articulate that, even if you know it's not going to appeal to somebody else. Once you're clear on that, once you can communicate that, you've got to be disciplined in your house. Meaning that you set those values, you set those behaviors that are acceptable in pursuit of that why, that correlate to that and support that, and you stick to them doggedly. You can't just abandon it at a moment's notice. This is where a lot of businesses will, and personally, I'll admit to this, at an individual level we fall off with this as well, because it's not the convenient one. It's nice to know what we believe in and say it to people, but when the rubber meets the road and we have to back it up through how we're showing up, and it means that maybe we miss a number this quarter, or it means that maybe we have to turn down that piece of business because it doesn't really align. I can't give them what they need, or their business actually makes me not fulfill my why. If I'm not willing to make those kinds of sacrifices, then I typically will sidestep this step. Just this time, we'll make an exception. And then next month when we're behind, well, since we did it last time, we'll just do it again this time. But that's it. After this quarter, we're not making any more of those exceptions. And then it's after this 6 months. We're not making those exceptions after this 6 months. We promise we're not going to do it. After this year, we're not making any more exceptions. And it just keeps kind of extending out and keeps extending out. we have to be disciplined in how we show up. Because that's what makes people form that bond of trust. They know that you're the person who's going to show up this time, not, well, is it going to be the person that I like, or the person that's just going to say whatever is the thing that makes the deal. So being disciplined in how you show up is crucial. And then that third piece is really just consistency of what? So ensuring that the tangible outputs you create, the conversations you have, the relationships that you keep, and the things that you say all actually reflect the thing that you say you believe and how you say you want to show up. What's important to you? And this one is really tough. If we are leading with what, we often just chase the dollars, the results, and then people look at that picture and they go, I have no idea what this company is. The great example of that was Dell compared to Apple. Back when Apple launched the iPod, Dell came out with the Dell Jukebox, which I totally wanted, by the way. Back when they had the catalog they would send you out with all the Dell computers and peripherals and stuff. We got that and I was so excited. I wanted a Dell Jukebox. But no one else did. So they stopped making them. And it's because Dell never really identified why it mattered. Dell never really said, this is who we are, and we make products that support that. They just said, well, people are making MP3 players. We're qualified to make MP3 players. They're just little computers that go in your pocket and make music. We can totally do that. And they made stuff that had great specs. Microsoft had the Zune with great specs, and all of those failed because they didn't make sense. Because people weren't really, they didn't know why they were there. So then that consistency of what was lost. They said, that's weird, stay in your lane, keep doing computers and monitors, that's what we like you for, no thank you to this other stuff. But Apple wasn't more qualified. They were equally qualified, maybe even less so than some of these other competitors. So that's an example of if you start from the opposite, start at the outside in, it doesn't work because people don't see what it is you stand for. When you start with why and you're clear about it, you have the context to say this totally makes sense because it allows us to do X. Now I have a little sheet here. I wrote down some thoughts throughout the day. So pardon me, I don't usually bring up my cue cards. But some thoughts occurred to me throughout the day that I wanted to write down. And one of them is you are in a very unique position / industry. This group is one team. We can all agree we go under the Skogman banner. But this team is also competing with each other on a day-to-day basis. Your colleagues largely are also your competitors. And that makes it really tough to have that sense of unified team. It can make the relationships a bit tricky. And I can't tell you how to solve that. I know that there is a bit of survival that goes along with that. I am a 1099 guy myself, so I know how it goes, where you technically, to use Penny's words, you wake up unemployed at the beginning of the day, and you hopefully have a job by the end of it. I know how that goes. So absolutely you have to stay afloat. The thing is, if you're clear on why you do what you do, if you're clear on what matters about this to you, you can really focus in on finding the things that help fulfill that need. Sometimes we get lost in the fact of what we can do rather than what we should do. What makes sense for us to do? What's my actual niche? And you in here, each one of you is your own brand, right? You have the big banner, but you also have lowercase banner underneath. That's your name, your reputation, and it's on the line every single time. And so it's so important that people can connect with that identity. But if you don't have an identity other than I just sell houses, or I'm nice, or I'm very friendly, or I take a smaller commission, if that's your identity, depending on what a person needs, it just becomes a transaction. It's not about a long-term relationship. Then those don't generate referrals. Those don't generate long-term friendships. Those don't generate, okay, we decided to move, but I want you to help me with my next house. Because that's all they're going to look for is, well, you don't have the lowest commission this time. And so it's so important that you take some time, whether it's today, sometimes alcohol helps, so maybe an hour from now, tonight, have a conversation with your significant other, or perhaps just the people who know you best, a good friend, a colleague who just really knows you inside and out. But have the conversation around, what matters to you about this? You may not have a super inspiring story about why you got into this. I actually know more people who don't have an inspiring story about how they got to where they are, but they're super inspiring when they talk about why they love what they do today. So what is that thing that you provide, that thing that just gets you so fulfilled when you are able to help someone do X? Whatever that X is for you, find that thing, because that helps you not only build your brand, but more importantly, focus on what's going to keep you at your natural best. When I talk about whys at an individual level, I don't really say it's like your life purpose. To me, it's a little much. It's for the work that I do, I'm like, okay, not quite there yet. But to me, your why really is just an articulation of what you're doing and the world you're creating when you are at your natural best. That thing that makes you feel super fulfilled. That thing that you kind of can't not do in most of the situations in your life. For example, my why is to catalyze growth in people so that they have the tools to build a better world. Surprise, surprise that I speak to people. However, I can't not do that when I'm at home with my nephews. I have, and some of you may resonate with this, grew up in a small town. Not a lot of outside influence comes in. Not a lot of outside thoughts and ways of thinking comes in. And I'd moved away. I lived in Vegas for 7 years, forgive me. And now I'm back in Pueblo so I can spend some time with my family because I haven't been for a while. And my nephew came up to me. I was wearing a company picnic shirt from my previous employer. And it had some like pink flowers on it. It was a gray shirt. And he said, "Hey, is that a girl's shirt? Like, why are you wearing a girl's shirt?" And I was like, "Dude, I put on some weight, but it's not like that tight. I don't know why you're giving me this hustle right now. And frankly, I don't appreciate your tone." And I was like, "Why do you think it's a girl's shirt?" And he said, "Well, there's pink on it." And I said, "Well, why would that mean that it's a girl's shirt?" And he said, "Well, pink's a girl's color." And I said, "Why would color have a gender?" And I slowly watched his mind explode. And if you've ever had those moments with like nieces, nephews, or children, you just like, "Yes, excellent." And you like slink back into the shadows. And you're like, "I did that. I got you to think different." That was my whole goal. But it's that thing you can't not do. I get so much fulfillment from doing that. That's why I love what I do. But I also love doing that for the people around me in general. So I bet you if you take some time today and think about what matters most to you in your life, what makes you feel at your natural best, you're going to see that parallel in work. You're going to see that thing that says, "That's why I love this part of it." There are some tough parts about what you do. There are parts of your job that you may absolutely loathe. But it's worth it because in the end, you get to do that. You get to do this thing for people. So spend some time thinking about what that thing is, because once you have that, that becomes a way you can communicate. You can design how you spend your time best, where I start to look for things, what's important to me when I'm going through, who I'm competing against, how I'm marketing these things, what neighborhoods I'm looking in. All of those things can factor in through the filter of knowing your why. Now, we've talked about the past. I want to finish with the future. Duh. Kind of need to. Someone who is synonymous with the future at this point is this guy. Who can tell me who this is? Elon Musk. All guys, by the way, it sounded like. It was very deep throaty. Elon Musk. So, Elon Musk. You might look at Elon Musk the same way you would look at Sir Richard Branson. That guy needs to figure out what he wants to do. He's got too much money. He's got like 9 different companies. Get your stuff together, man. Focus on what it is you actually want to do. But if you listen to what Elon talks about, and he did an interview with TED a couple years ago where he pretty much explicitly says this. His why is to create a future that humanity can be excited about, whether on this planet or another. Point blank. So it totally makes sense that he has a sustainable energy company. It totally makes sense that he's in sustainable transport, or that he's looking at ways to explore different planets, or that he's looking at ways that we can reroute networking under cities with the Boring Company. All these other ones add up to the vision of what he wants to do, the impact he wants to make on the world, the vision that he has for himself, because he doesn't want to wake up feeling sad. He wants to feel inspired and excited about the future. So he's building that. What's that thing for you as well? what puts it in context for you? We don't all have $1 billion, or even 500,000, or even some of us more than 10,000. But we all have the opportunity to find out what our version of that is. Find your why, spend some time in conversation on it, and then figure out how you can best utilize your time building that future that you want to live in. The last thought that I have, two thoughts that I have. Glad that I clicked that before I started talking longer. When you're able to do that, and I won't spend a ton of time on this slide, but I love this illustration because it really illustrates how it all fits together very well. Your why is that filter. Whatever comes in, opportunities, choices, those things come in and come at you, and through your why you figure out what fits, what doesn't fit. Then what fits goes through. You use your house to lift that off the ground. How do I show up bringing this to life? And then what it is that you do serves as amplification for that thing that you believe, the world that you want to build. And so Elon Musk is a great example because his message is way amplified because of his resources. But your message can be way amplified in your own world. Not necessarily the big world, capital W, but your world. Use your what's to amplify what it is that you believe. Bring it to life. And who knows what may happen. Maybe you get to Elon Musk status, no promises, or maybe you just have a more fulfilled life. And that's a really good goal to have. So now the thing that I was going to say, one last thing. I am very much aware and attuned to the fact that you got a lot going on in your business right now. Moving into some new markets. Got a lot of for sale by owners coming at you. A lot of new websites that are not so helpful for you. Some competing different groups that you're against. And for some of you, it's the first time you haven't been the big dog. You're actually the small dog on the block. And that's tough. The temptation can be, I've been in this business 10 years, 20 years. I'm going to stay in my comfort zone and do the thing I'm good at and not react. And that will get you 5 steps back. The thing we say on our team internally that I want to share with you is just a very simple concept that says, what got you here is not going to get you there. So if you're facing some of those challenges, if you can't figure out quite how to get around this or how we're going to deal with that, that's a challenge to grow. And that's an opportunity for you to take something on and make something great. Don't run away from it. Embrace it. Run towards it. Because you became a great company. You established dominance by doing exactly that. It was just kind of a while ago. So if you can come into a new market, try new things, get that new mindset, and at the risk of ending on a corny note, you can be the force of the future. All right. It was worth a shot. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'd like a hug.
Oh, thank you. I would like a hug. I did save 10 minutes. I like to give 10 minutes just for Q&A conversation if something popped up that, even if it's not a question, if it's something that popped up for you that you'd like to share with the room.
Exactly. Anybody?
So I'm struggling finding my why because you have the big picture stuff like a family and legacy, or I like to work with clients, I'm great at this. I'm struggling to find my why that could help me through the how and the what.
Yeah, so great call out. So said struggling finding the why, because sometimes we have those big picture things up there, right? Like family, kids, wife, that kind of stuff. And not all of us have that. I'm in a similar boat. So I will tell you how we walk people through their why and get them to a place that feels complete, which is, it's all through storytelling. So when we do why discoveries with people, it's usually like kind of over the course of a day. But something you might try is look back at the impactful stories you have throughout your life. Defining moments-ish. Doesn't have to be graduation day, wedding, birth of child, any of those. For example, one of my defining moments really was so I worked at Zappos. That was the company that I worked at before this. And a guy that he had come on, I think, like a few months ahead of this. And I just immediately hit it off. I think everyone in here has had that person where you're like, totally jive with that person, finally someone gets it, that person. And I enjoyed working with him, and we did similar projects together. And so he had put time on my calendar to meet at the coffee shop. And so I went down there expecting he was going to present some kind of project he wanted to work together on. And so when I asked him what was up, he said, "I'd like you to be my mentor." And I still get emotional about that moment because I'd never been asked that. And I hadn't realized how important that was to me until that conversation. And so you probably have had something similar to where you either learn something about yourself or something that evokes an emotional response when you look back and you're like, wow, like either I'm really proud that I did that, or it was a really awesome growth moment for me that I was able to do these kinds of things. And sometimes it's just about, I was able to achieve this, and what does that mean? But look back over those different stories, and what we do is you sit down with someone who, preferably an objective person, not someone who knows you super well, because then it kind of gets into that subjective, well, that doesn't really sound like you, or we start engineering our language a little differently. But find someone who can be objective, and then you just talk through them, and they just tell you what they heard. Like, sounds like this is something that popped out as important. You use this word a lot. What does that mean? Those kinds of questions. And for us, what makes it inspiring, why we've got criteria, but really the big pieces are you got your contribution and your impact. So what's the thing that I do, the action that I take on an ongoing basis that I get a lot from, and ultimately the goal of that, like the impact that it makes. So that way you've got, sometimes we have great vision statements, and that's a great impact. We're like, we want to make the world a better place. Cool. What do you do to help bring that to life? Or sometimes we've got great mission statements, which are, we are a provider of this service. Cool. So what? So if you got both of those pieces, you've got like the finish line and the racing lanes towards it. So those are some thoughts that kind of come to mind. But thank you for asking a question.